I have been reviewing hi-fi on YouTube for coming up to 8 years now, and my passion for hi-fi has probably never been stronger, but the excitement, the buzz that we all get when new gear is coming, that's definitely not as strong as it once was. But there's been one system component that I've been so excited to get. It's had my excitement levels back sky high again because I knew it was going to totally transform my system. And I think the best way to talk to you about this component transformation is with a little bit of history. When I first started this channel back in May 2017, my listening room, the same one that I'm sat in now, looked like this. It was a Batcave black for the best cinema and projector experience, but the room was really ugly. Then in January 2022, I made a big visual change to this listening room and it looked like this. And this was not only a big change to the room layout, it was especially big for the visuals on camera. But off camera, the visual change to the room made the emotional impact of sitting and listening to music better. I enjoyed my time listening to music in this room much more. Recently, I made even more changes to the room. And again, this was another improvement to how things looked and what the room was like to sit and listen to music in. And across all of this time, there has been pretty much just one system component that was common for it all. And just this last week, this room went from this, to this, to this, and now all done, it looks like this. I think you will agree that it's been quite a big transformation just in the last week, and an enormous transformation in totality. What's interesting to me is just this last week, the change of the hi-fi furniture that you can see behind me has made this room feel different to be in again. It's had the room has a different emotional impact on me. So listening to music in here, I'm more uplifted because the room's just nicer to spend time in. And, that's what hi-fi is supposed to be, right? A great listening experience that uplifts our mood. So the fact that furniture can do that as well, I think is really powerful and very interesting. So yes, the transformative component for the system, it's not an amplifier, it's not a DAC, it's not even the amazing Brahma preamplifier, although that could qualify. It's actually the solid steel HF Racks, of course you can see there behind me. And this video is going to be mostly about not just these racks, it's about why I've chosen to use dedicated hi-fi racks instead of just normal furniture. Because I've seen YouTube channels talk about and promote, really, I think, the use of normal furniture instead of dedicated hi-fi racks. And I don't think they've given the full picture, really, because, well, look, your decision of what hi-fi or furniture you choose to have is entirely up to you. I can only look at it from my point of view, but I think there are two very important scenarios that are extremely common, and I've been in both of these scenarios myself a number of times. Scenario one is I'm looking to buy a new hi-fi. I'm going to use amplifier, but it could be any hi-fi component. I'm looking to buy a new amplifier, but because of my hi-fi furniture, I only have X amount of space. So the amplifier I want to buy has to fit into that space. And that's an interesting and really quite a crazy way to buy a hi-fi, because really you should be buying an amplifier because you like its sound, maybe you like its look, but really because it drives your speakers properly and sounds how you like it. And if you're buying an amplifier that fits a certain size, you might be discounting many great options and narrowing down your choices to be very limited. And common sense would say, surely it makes more sense to buy the amplifier that you want and then buy the furniture that would allow you to have that amplifier in your home. But I think as audiophiles and just normal people, we don't do that. I think once we've committed to furniture, once we've spent the money on it once, we don't want to spend it again. We don't want to have to buy new furniture again. And we'll buy a new DAC, we'll buy a new amplifier 15 times and we'll keep the same furniture. Or at least that's how it's been for me. And the furniture I had in here recently, I'd had in here for about 15 years. So it's very much the case. And I've been through this myself. And then the second scenario I think ties in perfectly with all of this is that I want to buy this new really awesome amplifier, but it's very heavy. And I'm now worried whether my furniture, my normal furniture, will take the weight of the amplifier and give it enough ventilation with everything else that I have in that furniture. Will it take the weight? And this is very real world, because I was discussing this with John Darko only a week or so ago, because he has made a video recently showing you some IKEA furniture that he's using as a HiFi rack. And this furniture is the perfect example, because it looks very nice, but it's actually not big enough. His HiFi has to overhang that furniture because it's not designed for HiFi. And if he puts heavy amplifiers on that furniture, it bows. All right, back to that same very real world principle. So there's like a limit to the HiFi that he can put on those racks, because they're not designed for HiFi, and they are still potentially a great place to start. But like I said, it's not the full picture. And I think the reason why somebody might choose normal furniture over a dedicated HiFi rack will purely be because of the aesthetics. Because I searched long and hard, and I've actually been searching for years to try and find what I class as normal furniture that has a white finish that I think would be suitable, that could be a direct replacement, that would look lovely and be a direct replacement for a HiFi rack. And I actually couldn't find any that would replace a HiFi rack, not for its function. And actually some of the furniture I was looking at was really expensive, probably as expensive, if not more expensive, than a dedicated HiFi rack. So after years of looking and trying to find something to replace a rack, I realized you can't beat a dedicated HiFi rack for its function, for the function of supporting a HiFi system component. So the next thing was, I knew I wanted a white HiFi rack. I needed to find a manufacturer that I had full trust in, that I knew that their products would take masses of weight and be able to support some crazy expensive gear that I often review. And the first choice for me was Solid Steel. What I didn't know was that Solid Steel are a family-run company who manufacture all their products in-house in Italy. And looking at their website, I found it all a little confusing at first, but the fact that I wanted white racks really narrowed down my choices. And I definitely appreciated that they have some technical testing data on the website showing that their racks are designed from a technical background point of view and that they have been independently tested for their effectiveness. Although I will admit I didn't really read the full white papers. Instead, I just reached out to Solid Steel, who was aware of me. They knew this channel. They knew the types of gear that I normally review. So they recommended to me their HF Racks, which is their more premium high-end rack that comes in a gloss white finish, which I thought was absolutely perfect and looked really lovely. But I was a bit concerned at first because the HF Racks are larger. They're considerably larger, more in the depth plane than the racks that I was using. And obviously this room hasn't changed in size, right? It's the same size. So that was my initial concern. And Solid Steel recommended that I use their augmented reality 3D tool, which could give me some idea of what the rack would look like in this listening space. And I know we see this tool on Amazon for toasters, but this is the first HiFi company I have seen to offer this, and I thought it was super cool. So I have done my best to show you this tool in action, which was not easy to try and hold my phone still and move the rack around with my finger. But I thought it could be cool to show you the AR version of this rack in my room and then the real thing, so you can judge the effectiveness of this tool for yourself. And the rack I am showing you now is a HF4, which means HF as the rack series and 4 as how many tiers it has. Simple stuff really. And this is a fully modular rack system, which is something very important to me for future flexibility. And each shelf can take up to 80 kilograms. So that's covering 99.9% of anything I will ever review. But most importantly, each shelf is probably only ever going to be stressed about 60% of its maximum. And I say that's important because the HiFi racks I had in here before, I have loaded them with some crazy amounts of weight at times. The central one, when I put a big heavy amplifier like the Esoteric SO3 that's down there, that weighs 48 kilograms. You put that on a rack, yeah, you can tell it's a lot of weight. But worse was when I put the Griffin Diablo 333, which is 56 kilograms as an amplifier, plus everything else that's on the rack. When I put that on there, When we two-man job, when we lowered the weight onto the rack, you felt the rack just kind of come under tension, like, wow, this is a lot of weight. And it reminded me of like a fat kid trying to ride a dog. Like the dog's like, wow, this is a lot of weight. And I mean no offense by that, because, you know, I was a fat kid. But like this rack here, this solid steel HF4, you can see behind me, that has about 100 kilos of hi-fi on it, plus all the weight of the rack itself. And it's like nothing. You put like a 48 kilogram esoteric amplifier on there and it's just like nothing. It's just so strong, so solid and sturdy, even under like that extreme weight. And that just has to be better. And while I'm mentioning solid, what I didn't expect was the legs of this rack to be anything like how they are. They are solid stainless steel, which of course is very impressive. And if you want to be the girth envy of all of your audiophile buddies, this is the rack you want, because the legs are massive. And their weight is so heavy it really catches you out. Yet the finish on them I think is really nice, because it's not too shiny, it's just nice. And you could easily kill your audiophile cable argument enemy with the bottom spike section, because they are monsters with a big spike. I put one on some scales to see how heavy they are, and it weighed about 1.3 kilograms, and that's the smallest leg on the rack. So mass is definitely a thing here. But it's not just the mass that is impressive. Each layer is isolated from each other, so you'll almost have an individual stand for each rack layer, because there is a spike and spike shoe per layer, with several layers of rubber there that I'm sure absorb some vibration, but it also stops the metal sticking to each other, so you can undo each of the individual parts really quite easily. And the fact that each leg is made up of separate parts means you can easily replace just one part of the leg if it ever got damaged, which of course is unlikely with stainless steel, but accidents can happen. But more useful for someone like me, if I want to change the rack height, all you need to change is the middle sections of each leg. You don't have to change the whole leg. So that's a cool thing for the future, for going bigger or smaller with a rack, and the furniture not having any limit to the size and weight of hi-fi it can take. I definitely appreciate that's super useful for this job. And the size of these racks has actually been one of the big surprises for me, because I was worried about it initially, like the depth of the racks, because like I said, it's considerably deeper than what I had before. But when I started setting them up, I actually gave the rack more space. I pulled the rack more into the room, because I started to appreciate what the extra rack size and space around it offers. Because when I put my largest amplifier, the esoteric SO3, onto the old rack, it would normally cover the whole shelf. And I felt I had to overhang it some at the front to allow space for all the cables. But with this solid steel HF rack, you can see, even with a big amplifier on it, there is still loads of space. So it can handle very large hi-fi components. But I even prefer it for small items, because I think having a white background to all hi-fi components, whether they're finished in black or silver, looks really nice. And I don't think it looks weird having a small phono stage or its power supply sat on a very spacious white rack. I think it looks really nice, actually. While I'm speaking about vinyl playback, one of the other concerns I had was I wouldn't be able to use my ISO Acoustics Delos turntable platform, which is a really big, thick, heavy platform with 6 ISO acoustic isolators, because the wood wouldn't match up visually with the white racks. And I was worried that I might get worse vinyl sound quality. But I actually took advantage of the system downtime between the rack changes to do some important turntable maintenance, such as adding oil to the spindle. It really needed that. And I did a better job of setting up the Origin Live turntable and leveling it, because I could see what I was doing much easier, as the solid steel HF3 rack is much taller than the old rack I had, and for some reason I just felt like I could see things more easily. To my surprise, I'm seeing the extra rack size as being a real advantage. Like I said, I could put the turntable exactly where I want it, allowing space around it for my little stylus brushes, so I don't keep knocking them on the floor like I used to and losing them under the rack. I think I've bought 4 or 5 project stylus cleaning brushes because I keep losing them under the rack, so I'm not going to have to worry so much about that anymore. But for sound quality, I haven't had a huge amount of time to listen so far, and there's new parts in the system, but the sound of vinyl was at least as good as it was before. if not better. So I don't feel like I've lost anything. I feel like, yeah, maybe on the old rack, the Delos made a big difference because the rack, was limited in what it could do. But this really lovely solid steel HF3 rack is probably good enough for a turntable to sit on top of it. I think I'm even getting better sound. But look, it's early days. I'll test that more in the future. When you are limited on physical space like I am, nothing is ever going to be perfect. And I can see some people straight away pointing things out, or pointing something out that I've been straight away aware of. The fact that you have a big rack in the middle of the speakers, it's still behind the speakers by a good couple of feet. But the big one in the middle, the HF4, what that's doing at the moment for me is playing an optical illusion trick between my eye and my ear and my brain mechanism, because as the speakers image sound behind them, it does sound like that sound is coming from the racks. And previously the racks I had were as low as possible on purpose so that wouldn't happen. So that is something that I'm adjusting to, like the perception of sound coming over the racks, and that's definitely not ideal. And my plan was to set up 3 HF3 racks, so 3-tier racks, and have them all side by side, the same as I did before, and only using shorter leg lengths to keep the racks as low as possible. However, I asked Solid Steel to also send me the longer leg length to make a HF4 rack, as I thought it's likely the rack that most people will buy. Then when I assembled it, I found it's actually a great size rack. I just really liked it. And I think it would be perfect to have a turntable on top of, as I'm showing you now with my acting of pretending to cue up the stylus. Don't mock the acting. But then I realized with what I had here, I could create a dedicated 3-tier rack for vinyl, a 4-tier main rack for digital and amplifiers, which I could scale down to a 3 or 2-tier rack depending on what I'm reviewing. And then I can have a dedicated 2-tier rack for power conditioning and networking. I really like this layout. It's not what I planned at all, so I'm seeing it as super lucky, but of course it's thanks to the HiFi Racks modularity. But the eye, ear, brain mechanism of hearing the sound coming over the racks is still a thing for me. So what I will be doing is a lot more dark room listening, because dark room listening is a great thing to do anyway, because we take away the eye part of the eye, ear, brain, and normally hi-fi sound better in the dark or a darker room, don't they? So I will be doing darker room reviews now, darker room listening much more than I was doing before, when it's critical listening. And that can be an especially cool thing to do when you have a DAC like the HiFi Rose RD160 in the system, because in the dark you see its party trick VU meter animation, amazing screen, that bit clearer. And it looks much cooler in the dark, doesn't it? I'm sure you will agree with me. And I think the last potential negative of a setup like this, which is pretty extreme, I appreciate, but obviously I'm a reviewer, so I kind of need more probably than the average person, is going to be the cost of it all, because these are not cheap hi-fi racks. They're premium hi-fi racks. They're going to cost you some money, but they're far from the most expensive racks you can buy. They're actually kind of in the middle for the overall market. But what's interesting is you cannot appreciate their quality. I couldn't appreciate their quality from photos alone. You don't appreciate them till you get them out of the box and you feel the weight of everything. You feel the quality of the manufacturing, because up until that point, it just seems like wood and metal. When you hold it in your hands, you start to assemble the rack together and how well all the threads all fit and how it all just goes together so lovely. And then just how solid everything is. It fills you with a huge amount of confidence that you can see where the money's gone for a product like this. It's gone into the quality of the build. But of course, it is a lot of money. It can be a lot more money to buy these than, what furniture you might buy in IKEA. So that's something to think about. But when it comes to value for money, for me, value is not what something costs you. It's how much you're going to use it for how long. And like I said, the last racks I had in my system, I had them for over 15 years. And HiFi Racks, you might not be listening to the hi-fi, but they're in use 24/7, 365, aren't they? They're always there. They're always in use. So I appreciate this video might seem like some kind of glorified advert for Solid Steel. It's definitely not intended to be that. The reason I created this video is because I'm really quite excited actually to have these racks. I think they're going to make such a visual difference, such a visual impact on my reviews and videos going forward, and there's going to be loads of questions. Why have you got the racks set up like that? What are those racks? So I figured it made sense to create a video right at the start explaining not only what the racks are, why you have them set up the way you have, and actually why you've chosen to use them, as I say, instead of normal furniture. And I genuinely think, and these have massively exceeded my expectations. I was excited to get them, and it was much better. Like the look, how they look, how they feel. I do think it's legitimate, huge transformation of the system, visually and functionality, and just the emotional effect they're going to have on me, like the way I feel spending time in here. And I spent a lot of time in this listening room, a huge amount of time. So I hope this video has been interesting in some way. I hope it's going to be useful to people in the future. That's my real hope for this video. And obviously, if you've enjoyed it, hit the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to see more.